Good morning, everyone. Welcome to North's COVID-19 webinar, which will talk about the support that the club is offering to members during the current crisis. My name's Colin Gillespie. I lead the Loss Prevention Department, and I'm acting as moderator for today's session. Before we start, can I remind everyone to stay muted throughout the webinar, please? And that'll cut out background noise. And also, can I ask everybody to be patient if there are tech problems? We're working from home like many of you, and there have been some local internet problems for us, so apologies if sound quality suffers or if there is a lag in the slides. As we're recording it, the slide lag shouldn't be there, and if you are confused by slide lag, you'll be able to watch the recording and see it in real time. The format today is a panel. I'm going to start the webinar by asking our panel a few questions about the work they've been doing so far to support you, our members, and then after that you'll get a chance to ask questions. You can submit your questions at any time. Please use the Internet Messenger to submit your questions, and feel free to submit them throughout. If we don't get around to answering your questions during the course of the webinar, we will follow up on them all afterwards in writing. So you'll not only have a recording of the webinar, you will be sent an answer sheet with all the questions on it, so that you can know as much as you can about what we're up to and various things P&I. Okay, let's meet the panel. We've got with us today Belinda Ward, Barry Ayliffe, David Richards and Alvin Forster. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves one by one. B, you go first, please.
Good morning, Colin. Hello, everyone. I'm Belinda, and just to introduce myself further, I have been part of North's claim team for almost 30 years now. Much of that time handling all types of P&I claim, but in more recent years, I've headed up North's Specialist Person Injury Team. I sit on several international group subcommittees and am our club's representative on the IG COVID-19 working group. I'm very much looking forward to this session. Thanks.
Thanks, B. Barry, can you go next, please?
Yes, good morning, Colin. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me. The technology is hopefully working. I'm Barry Ayliffe. I'm a solicitor in North's FD&D Defence Department. Some of you may know me. I work predominantly for our German and Greek membership. I also am the club's representative on the BIMCO documentary committee, so had an involvement in the drafting and approval of their infectious or contagious diseases clause back in 2015.
Thanks, Barry. David, please.
Good morning. I'm a director in North's P&I Claims Department, and I have particular responsibility for the management and handling of cargo claims. Before joining North in 2017, I was a partner in an international law firm in London, and now I'm with North. I also am the club's representative on the International Group Claims Cooperation Subcommittee.
Thank you, David. And finally, Alvin.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Alvin Forster. I'm in the Loss Prevention Department. Been there for about 8 years now. I'm an ex-seagoing marine engineer, spending over a decade at sea, and came out of it relatively unscathed. For the last 3 months or so, I've been very much immersed in the subject of coronavirus, and without, thankfully, contracting it.
So thanks very much, everybody. We've got a good panel here, the people who are leading their respective parts in the club on COVID-19 issues, and our parts of and the main men in our and ladies in our C19 team. I think I'll start with B, because the biggest concern with COVID-19 is people's safety. B, can you tell us what impact the crisis is having on our claims experience with respect to crew claims?
Yeah, sure, Colin. I have to say, so far, the ship owners at North have, we think, been very fortunate and that we haven't any reported cases of a positive COVID-19 yet. We do have a few crew awaiting test results, and our fingers are very much crossed. But realistically, we do expect that to change. And we are aware that other IG clubs, especially those with cruise vessel entries, are experiencing COVID claims. So I think it's only a matter of time for North. The main problem that we are experiencing at present is due to the preventative measures being introduced by nation states. Increased precautions in port, the closing of borders, the widespread restriction of movements. It means it's becoming almost impossible for our members to repatriate and replace crew at the end of their rotation. More seriously, we are experiencing major problems in obtaining medical treatment ashore for those who are sick, but not necessarily displaying COVID symptoms or have become injured. Even landing the remains of those who have sadly died is far from straightforward. It's very, very tricky. So far, we are managing workarounds with the enormous assistance of our correspondents, but this is going to become increasingly difficult with time.
Thanks, Bea. I think most of the members listening will recognise those difficulties. So can you describe briefly the sort of advice and support you've been giving to members?
Well, we are liaising closely with each other at North. I work with the other panellists quite well, and especially our wonderful loss prevention team, in order to get information and advice out to members as quickly as possible. We are also working with our correspondents on the ground who are being amazing during these difficult times, as well as closely with the international group, which has set up a working group, as I said, on which I sit. But mostly at present, on a day-to-day basis, my team are working hard to ensure the crew receive the necessary treatment that is not necessarily COVID related. And it's inevitably become far more complex and is taking a lot more effort and time than usual. It's a lot trickier than that perhaps sounds. And I'd say in addition to this, I'd like to mention, North launched our Mind Matters campaign just over a year ago. This provides an invaluable service to crew who are naturally stressed right now. His families are stressed, and the whole complement on board, and they're naturally stressed. Provides online materials relating to mental welfare, and via Mind Call, which is a 24/7 phone line service manned by professionals who speak a variety of languages, it gives the crew the means of talking through any problems that they are experiencing at present.
Thanks, Bea. That's clear, and I think Mind Call particularly could be something to stress to the seafarers that they can call and talk to somebody if they aren't particularly worried about their families or even worried about their own health. Bea, do you see a longer-term impact on crew claims, or indeed more generally with crew?
Colin, that's inevitable. It's very difficult to predict exactly what that might be. But inevitably, there are going to be COVID illnesses that North experiences, and perhaps even fatalities, and that is going to drive claims up. Even where illnesses are treated relatively easily and with minimum distress to the crew, the costs involved in quarantined medical care, etc., are likely to be substantial. Normal claims, if I can call them that, might become more complicated and thus more expensive through delays in treatment. And unfortunately, crew who haven't been affected by COVID directly might end up with more serious and complicated or permanent injuries through lack of timely treatment. And slightly more left field, perhaps, I think we've observed at North, and we're talking to ship owners, that in the last decade or so, it has become increasingly difficult to attract the right crew. And by that, I mean properly qualified and appropriately experienced crew who are looking to spend a lifetime career at sea. Either they give up their careers at sea earlier, or else they're not interested in it at all. So I don't know whether an event like this and how the crew have had to cope with it will make it even less attractive to them as a career for the future.
Thanks, Bea. That's quite a concerning point at the end, the aftermath. There might be more to this in the aftermath, but let's hope not. Thanks very much, Bea. I think that's all very clear. Another area where I know the FD&D department has been particularly busy is in giving charter party advice. Barry, can you talk us through what sort of issues the FD&D department has been dealing with since the early days of COVID-19 back in January?
Yes, Colin, I mentioned in the introduction BIMCO's infectious or contagious diseases clause. We've had a lot of inquiries around that. Should we be using it? It is the club's preferred clause. Members saying that they perceive it to be owner biased, notwithstanding BIMCO's protestation that it is a balanced clause. Members coming to us saying we've proposed the clause to our contractual counterparts and they've amended it. What do you think of the amendments? We've proposed the clause to our contractual counterparts. They've rejected it and they've proposed this clause. What do you think of it? And then specifically around the clause itself, at where it says the vessel shall not be obliged to go to an affected area if the owner's master, in their reasonable judgment, consider it to be a risk. Do we have to go? We've heard of reports of this disease in Wuhan. Do we have to go to Ningbo? Do we have to go to Shanghai? Very often the answer, certainly at the outset, was, well, if COVID-19 had been reported in London, would you refuse to go to the Port of Tyne for cargo operations? Probably you wouldn't. And then we very much moved on to very, very specific questions around, once the vessel is actually at a port and there are delays, is lay time running? Can I give notice of readiness? What about free critique? Is my vessel ready? Am I off hire? The clause says any delays, any cause whatsoever. Can charterers rely on that to put me off hire, or am I performing by waiting the mandatory 14 days? I'm actually doing what my charterers are wanting me to do, therefore the vessel is on hire. Force majeure. My ship's on demurrage, charterers have declared force majeure. What's the effect? Force majeure has been declared. Is it actually due to an unforeseen circumstance? Can my charter be cancelled? Can I cancel the charter? Can my counterpart cancel the charter? So a whole myriad of questions has kept us very busy.
It's clear that you're very busy, Barry. I think even busier than usual could be used to describe most people at the club trying to work our way through this crisis and support members who have got a hell of a lot of operational difficulties on top of the contractual difficulties to work with. Another thing I know that we're seeing is in relation to the carriage of cargo, particularly keeping cargo moving. David, can you tell us what's been happening on the cargo claims front, please?
Certainly. At the moment, we're dealing with quite a large number of queries arising from the current crisis, including helping our members think about ways to mitigate their increased exposures arising from the COVID-19 problems, and in particular, the port congestion and delays that is causing, and delays within the banking chain. At the same time, cargo claims that have been reported or notified to us are at a fairly normal level. We've got about the same number of cargo claims as we normally do, and on the whole, they're not COVID-19 specific. But our suspicion is that the true picture is probably masked at present, because until the situation evolves a little bit further, and ships are finally able to discharge that have faced congestion and port closures, it's not until then that we'll start to see the delay claims for perishable or short shelf life products or just-in-time cargo arise. And so we'll have to see what happens in the longer term. And as I said earlier, we are seeing disruption in the banking chain. The staff working at banks are also working remotely, and so there delays processing payments under letters of credit. And so we have seen a few instances where cargo discharge, which is taking place under an LOI, is interfered with because the shippers haven't yet been paid. And the final point that has come up recently is time limits. A number of countries now have introduced emergency legislation to deal with COVID-19, and as part of that have suspended time limits, and that's going to have an impact on older claims, and is something we're going to have to work through in the future.
So, David, I believe there's particular problems with bills of lading being delayed. How are we supporting members in that area and keeping the cargo moving?
Well, largely we're trying to answer queries that are coming up from members to mitigate that particular challenge. As I say, so some members are reporting that their ships are going to arrive before the bills of lading, and they have concerns in that area. Fortunately, P&I has already well-established mechanisms for dealing with extraordinary events beyond the control of prudent ship owners. In particular, the wide discretion that is given to members' boards to allow claims which might otherwise be excluded. And in terms of particular questions, we're helping members look at alternative transport contracts, in particular seaway bills, which have an advantage in that they don't need to be produced at the discharge port in order for delivery to occur, and also looking at electronic bills of lading. And the international group has already undertaken a lot of work prior to this crisis to support the industry to use electronic bills. And I think this crisis is highlighting some of the advantages of electronic bills over the traditional paper system.
Yes, certainly that might be one change that the industry moves to as a result of this crisis. Far more adoption of electronic bills. It could be something that just really does kickstart that. Time will tell. David, what do you think the likely long-term impact on cargo claims might be?
Well, I think we're going to be dealing with a number of quite unique issues that we're going to have to work through for some time to come, even after the immediate crisis is over. There are legal changes which are going to have to be considered. I'll give you an example. We saw that Brazil has passed an emergency law, so one would imagine quite rushed, that allows for digitized bills of lading, not bills of lading on an electronic trading system, but just an electronic version of a paper bill. And if that law remains in place, we're going to have to look at the impact of that. The other thing I would point to is the heightened risk of using LOIs due to the global economic impact this crisis is going to have. And really, this is going to underscore the importance of ensuring that LOIs are only accepted from creditworthy people and institutions, and that considerable caution should be taken before relying on widespread use of bespoke LOIs to deal with potential insurance gaps.
Thanks very much, David. I think it's clear that there is an awful lot for our members and for us to think about in respect of cargo, and that the whole uncertainty of the situation with crew and with cargo is something that we're all living with and trying to work through at present. Finally, Alvin, on the loss prevention front, I'm very aware that we have been inundated with inquiries in relation to the situation in countries and ports. Can you just tell us about how we're dealing with those? And it's quite innovative, I think. Tell our members how we're dealing with those inquiries.
Yes, thanks, Colin. Yeah, you're right. And as you might expect, most of the inquiries directly away do concern the state support and the restrictions being imposed by all these countries' governments. But we've got a very good network of correspondence and other external contacts around the world, and we receive an amazing amount of information every day. It's a lot to handle. But ports of countries offering new restrictions and measures as the situation evolves. And hopefully, over the next 5 minutes, I can describe how you can get this information. Next slide, please. You can access this information on our online map-based platform, which is called My Globe View, which is available for members, and I'll demonstrate its use and some of its capabilities later. But you can remember, you can also access our information in a relatively old-fashioned way by going to our website and consulting a normal table which lists all the country restrictions. Because we do have a dedicated coronavirus area on the website, which includes some very useful resources and links, both our own material and from external sources such as the WHO, IMO, and the International Chamber of Shipping Advice. Please, Colin. Okay, to access My Globe View, you must make sure that you are registered for My North. I would stress that this is different to North Online, which is where you would normally access your claims and policy information. My North does require a separate registration. But once you're in there, in the My North, you'll benefit from a huge amount of loss prevention material, on an array of topics as well, not just COVID-19, of course. But, this is a very powerful loss prevention tool. So, next slide, please. And from there, you will load up My Globe View. I hope you'll find it simple to use and intuitive. And to find the coronavirus information, it's quite a simple process. Go to the top right-hand corner, select the layers icon, and select Outbreaks. You can deselect other layers to try and avoid cluttering on your screen. And from there, you will see the relevant information overlaid on your map, which you can zoom in and out of as required. Next slide. One of the layers, and these red circles here show the scale of the outbreak in each affected country. Click on this and you'll see the current number of infection cases and the number of deaths attributed to COVID-19. This is updated daily by the Johns Hopkins University, and they use a number of data sources. Of course, this does rely on individual governments supplying reliable information, which is a different matter altogether and is completely out of our control. Next slide. You think you'll see the real value, and this is the country and port specific advice, and this is again provided by our global network of contacts. This advice generally consists of the requirements and restrictions imposed by port authorities and the national governments. Examples, best isolation requirement prior to birthing. Many countries are requiring a minimum of 40 days from previous port call before being allowed to birth. Infection and sanitation requirements. This might require checks at the anchorage before birth. What are the requirements on health declarations and issuance of free pratique? And then there's other advice there on the restrictions on crew shore leave and crew changes, which is increasingly becoming prohibited. In some cases, it's been reported that crew won't even access the quayside. It's very restrictive out there in some countries. Where known, we also report on the port operational status. The vast majority of ports around the world still continue to be open and working at some capacity. However, many ports are experiencing difficulties in operating at full capacity due to stevedore shortages and other reduced services such as customs, etc. On this slide, you can also see a layer specific to Chinese port operation info. This is being provided by Ayliffe, who create My Globe View and useful information provided by valuable hints. Then on the next slide, please go. We have a final additional layer of port and country information, which again is being provided by Ayliffe. They sweep the internet for relevant information and upload it to My Globe View, so it's an excellent accompaniment to the information that we've uploaded on there from our correspondence. Next.
Alvin, I've got a question. Can you just tell everyone how that's kept up to date, so that they're reassured that it is current?
It's kept up to date with blood, sweat and tears. We receive emails and correspondence and contacts from the world every day, dozens of them. We filter through it, extract the relevant advice, and we update our information, and we provide that to Ayliffe to upload on the map. So it's a lot of work goes in there, and it's updated on a daily basis.
Thanks, Alvin. for those of you who want to link to those things, it's all done via our website. It's quite easy, and there's some contact details there. I think that's enough from the panel for now. This is now time for questions, and I can see that we've had quite a number of questions in already. So I'll deal with a few of those and ask the relevant person. B, I think this one is very much in your wheelhouse. Does North cover for crew quarantined ashore due to border restrictions, wages, accommodation charges, etc.?
Thanks, Colin. Yes, that is a question that we're getting asked quite a lot. The club's position is the same as all of the IG clubs' position, which is that actually the wording of our respective quarantine rules doesn't extend to crew ashore, only to the vessel itself. Obviously, if crew themselves are affected by COVID, then cover kicks in the normal way for any crew illness, and with that would come all associated charges. But quarantine, just as a means of a port preventative control, is not a covered head of claim.
Okay, thank you, B. Next question, quite a practical question here. What precautions will an owner have to take when getting a security team on board for trading through a high-risk area? That's quite a practical difficulty. Alvin, maybe you'd like to say something about that?
My initial thoughts there would be to treat it the same as anybody new coming on board. We are working on a helpful advice and checklist on checking on what to check before bringing people on board. Some it's based on the International Chamber of Shipping's publication, where they provide a checklist. So it's just a case of, it's almost like a questionnaire, to be honest, just to find out the history of the people before they come on board. That would be my initial thoughts on that.
I think that's it. I think it's pre-boarding checks, and that'll probably go both ways. I think the security company will want to know that the ship's clear of coronavirus as much as it can, and obviously the ship's concerned about the security guards coming on board. So there will probably have to be an exchange of bona fides, if you like, saying that we have been self-isolating and we are clear of coronavirus. Then I think once they're on board, I think then it becomes probably quite important to try and keep that social distancing as much as possible. Put the security guards in separate cabins, obviously, from the crew. Try and keep that 2 meters social distancing as much as is possible. I don't think there's much more that really can be done there. B, have you got any comments from a personal illness and injury point of view?
I think it's sensible for members generally to have a plan as to what they're going to do on board, either to separate parties travelling with them for self-isolation, or when there's an actual suspected case of COVID, we would encourage members to have something in place in advance of that. Other than that, I can only echo what Alvin has already suggested.
Yeah, it's just take a good practical approach, I think. Next question, probably for you, B. What are the chances of members facing potential liability claims that go beyond their contractual obligations due to COVID-19?
Well, that is obviously something we can't answer definitively. We don't know what the chances are. The club covers members' liabilities in negligence, contract or statutory. So if there are those liabilities established for illness, club cover will be there. But I suppose that would relate to whether members had been perhaps negligent in exposing their crew to COVID. I can't see in practice how that could work, because it's a worldwide epidemic. We are all exposed to some extent or other, and provided members are taking more reasonable precautions to protect their crew, I can't see that there should be additional liabilities from the contract. But really, we don't know what could be pursued, what different courts might find in future, and that is something we'll provide every assistance to members with.
Okay, thanks, B. I think that's clear. Another question here, probably for Barry. If free pratique is refused due to a suspect case on board, will the notice of readiness be invalid?
Well, most again, it depends on the precise wording used in the charter. But free pratique is normally a mere formality. So one will often see in a charter, notice of readiness can be given whether in free pratique or not. But the real question is, is the ship ready? Can she be put at the disposal and use of the charterers? If there is an unfortunate case of a crewman with COVID-19 or suspected, I anticipate that the port authorities would not allow the ship to work and not be ready, and so lay time would not commence.
Thanks, Barry. That's quite clear. Thank you very much. Next question. David, this relates to time bars, so probably one for you. Can the claims time bar be extended by courts due to COVID-19, with particular reference to China?
Well, I'm like Barry, an English solicitor. So from the English point of view, yes, the courts and arbitrators have power to extend time limits in fairly limited circumstances, normally where the delay can be reasonably explained, and normally the application for an extension by the court is made promptly, and it's probably that second part that will be difficult. But I would expect the courts to have sympathy where someone really couldn't protect time due to the coronavirus and made a prompt application for relief. Other courts, as I said, are generally trying to deal with this matter through legislation or emergency regulations, and are dealing with it head on. And I would suspect that most courts will have some procedure where you can ask for relief from a time bar. The position in China in particular, I don't know, but if you speak to your regular contact at North, they may be able to find an answer via our correspondent network.
Okay, thanks, Barry. So time bars probably can be extended, but there might be some practical difficulties as courts aren't open. Here's a question about crew employment contracts expiring during disembarkation restrictions and then going beyond the MLC permissible period. Is there a special agreement or contract that has to be signed?
Colin, I'm guessing you're batting that one my way.
Yes, B, I think that's one for you.
As yet, there have been no uniform agreements created, so we don't know in practice what would happen. But if members aren't able to physically repatriate crew and therefore they are on board beyond the time, we can't see that any country, especially as it is all the countries' movement restrictions that is causing this, is going to take issue with that through the MLC, distressing as it may be for the crew on board. I mean, what I mean is if members are taking all practical measures to repatriate the crew, then I don't see how they can be penalised for that. As far as the crew contracts themselves go, we are seeing that most members are extending these, so that obviously whilst remaining on board, the crew are still fully covered, and the club obviously will cover those liabilities. So really it's a case-by-case basis. Rather like David was answering on the previous question, I think it's a case of members showing that they have taken all reasonable action, in which case other authorities, we would hope, would take a sympathetic view to their efforts in these unprecedented times.
Okay, thanks, B. A couple of very practical questions. Again, probably your way, B. What if a crew member does need to disembark into intensive care, and what about the deviation aspects of that, particularly in account of restrictions in some countries?
Well, this comes right to what I was saying at the beginning. At the moment, the main problem we're dealing with is crew who do require medical treatment, even if it's not COVID. This would be also the same if that treatment was intensive care. And it is being very difficult. It is becoming very difficult to obtain that for them. Obviously, safety of life is always paramount. And if the vessel has to divert in order to obtain such treatment, those costs are covered, as they always have been, and we will make every effort to try and find timely and appropriate treatment for the crew. We can't say on an individual basis how that is going to be procured. This is where my team are spending a lot of time on the phone to correspondents in all local ports to see what can be offered where, as well as talking to various, our own retained doctor, Dr. Charlie Eastman, and various other telemedical companies, so that we can try and be very clear as to the conditions of the crew, what treatment he may need, how serious it actually is. We are finding some ports are actually more sympathetic if the crew member does require intensive care, but something which is a mid-range serious injury isn't receiving much sympathy. Literally last night we had a case come in where a crew member had been badly hit in the eye and was suffering blurred vision, which had gone on for several hours, as well as pain and swelling in the eye. We can't persuade the local port where the vessel was that this was serious enough to warrant him being taken ashore. So we're trying to find somewhere else to get him treated, because in our experience, this can easily lead to the loss of vision in that eye. So this is a case-by-case basis. We're doing our best to help members, and diversion and increased costs arising out of it are indeed covered.
Thanks very much, Bea. It's particularly, for me, sad to see countries stopping seafarers having treatment, because seafarers are keeping things running. They're keeping supplies coming to everybody's front door, and they're not being allowed to be treated. Let's hope that the efforts through the International Chamber of Shipping that are being supported by the IG to recognise seafarers as key workers and get countries to treat seafarers a bit more fairly will bear fruit very quickly. Got a question here on force majeure, so that's probably for you, Barry. Will COVID-19 be regarded as a force majeure event for whatsoever claims that might arise?
Well, I could speak for a considerable length of
days.
time on this, Colin. As you might imagine, English law, English common law has no general concept of force majeure, and one won't be implied into a contract. Whether an event is a force majeure event very much depends on the wording used in the contract. The wording will be looked at very strictly. The words themselves will be looked at. The court or tribunal wouldn't be looking to try and ascertain what the intention of the parties was or what they intended. It really does depend on the wording used.
Okay, so it's very much horses for courses, and it'll be treated on case-by-case basis. Okay, another question on crew, and this is in respect of the Philippines. If crew members signed off from vessels in the Philippines, are there any steps to protect owner's position under the 120/240 day rules where this cannot be complied with because of quarantine measures?
Well, yes, this is a tricky one. That is another unforeseen result of COVID. In order to protect members' legal position in the Philippines, it's necessary to treat crew, even with quite minor illnesses and injuries, within a certain period to protect them being found, the member being found liable for full disability claims, 100% compensation. Well, we don't know how that's going to be treated. Like everything else, we're going to have to wait and see. But North and the other IG clubs are talking to the authorities in the Philippines to see how they will look at this. We're not getting much response on that yet. We're working closely with all the correspondents there to try and find out what we can do on a practical basis, and also to petition the authorities. And we work directly with our own group of clinics, so seeing if there's a way with them that we can try and ensure that to protect those time limits, we can actually have crew seen. But we really don't know how this is going to develop, and it's another of those long-term events that could become a problem for us.
Okay, thanks very much, Bea. There don't seem to be any more questions from the participants. If you've got any questions, please submit them. I've got a few other things that I think might help. David, if a bill of lading doesn't arrive in a port in time, what is the cover position if there should be a missed delivery?
Well, the situation where cargo is delivered without production of an original bill of lading, negotiable bill, or a straight bill, is that is outside standard cover for all IG clubs. If you have issued a way bill, the situation is slightly different. You have to give delivery to the person named in the way bill, but you don't have to see that document is surrendered to you. We are trying to help members who are in that situation with possible pragmatic solutions in individual cases. If a claim were to arise from extraordinary circumstances where beyond the member's control, where they've done everything possible to avoid a misdelivery claim, then there is the mechanism of board discretion, which is within the club rules.
Another question here for a couple of people, but probably more specifically for Alvin. Alvin, where steel preload surveys are required and we can't get a surveyor to the port or to the vessel, what is the advice to members in those circumstances?
Yeah, that is a risk we have identified. Firstly, we would try and make best efforts to get a surveyor in attendance, but if not, we just want to try and get some advice ready for the crew so they can do their best to try and, fulfill that role that a surveyor would normally do. Because obviously, do a preload survey, you want to accurately record the apparent ordering condition of the cargo, make sure that the mate receipts are, updated accordingly, and also you want to be able to prove that you've exercised due diligence. Seaworthiness, which is essentially by the tightness of your hatch covers. So something we're working on at the moment is to get that clear, simple, easy to follow advice to seafarers on how they can do this. So it'll be challenging because it's not, a lot of places where they're not going to allow access to the cargo prior to loading. The crew have got an uphill task of trying to identify damage and record damage as the cargo's going on. That's a task, but it's we're going to try and help the crew where we can by giving that clear and simple advice.
Thanks, Alvin. We haven't had too many problems yet with surveyors not being able to get to the vessels for any type of claim. There have been a few, but not very many, so the correspondents are really doing a good job to keep all that working. Got another question here, charter party issue. If redelivery at the end of a charter party is delayed due to crew being subject to COVID quarantine restrictions, who might be liable? Barry.
Again, I'm sorry to say keep repeating myself. It does very much depend on what your charter party says. I mean, if you're an owner and you're in the fortunate position of having the BIMCO infectious contagious diseases clause, that has an express indemnity. Charters indemnify against any delays that are incurred as a consequence of the vessel having visited an affected area. So again, it is very much, what does the charter party say? Otherwise, you are, where there's no specific words, you are falling back onto, well, was the port safe? Did the was the crewman infected as a consequence of having complied with charterers' orders to go to that particular port or otherwise?
Okay, thanks, Barry. So case by case basis, depending on what it says in the charter party again. I think we're just coming to the end of the session now. Can I take this chance to thank everybody for listening in and inviting us into your homes in many cases. Just reiterate, if you can register for and use my Globeview, that will give you very good handle on port and country information and what can and can't happen in those ports and countries in respect of operations. Some more general advice on our COVID-19 page on the website, and if you've got a specific question that isn't answered there, please email your usual contact at North and they'll do their best to deal with it in cooperation with the C19 team that North has running. And very many thanks to you all. I shall leave you now to your valuable work. Have a good weekend, and most of all, can everybody please stay safe? Thank you.